Why Western demons are often angels, or how Satanism became a religion in the West. How can there be a religion called Satanism? To the Muslim mind, to worship or honoring of Angra Mainyu is something that is akin to certifiable insanity. How can one wish to bring more ignorance, stupidity, violence, poverty, and sickness into one's life, which the worship of Angra Mainyu would do? The answer is, of course, that the demons of the West are not the devas of the East. In the dominant religion of the West, Christianity, the creator God is saddled with the Edenic myth, where it appears that Adonai is an oppressor God who punishes and abuses his creation for daring to desire knowledge and immortality based on their own efforts. For this reason, the instigator, educator, the serpent Lucifer, can be seen as an heroic light. Orthodox demons are easily seen as heroic rebels against an oppressive God of unreason and violence. Most Judeo-Christian demons can be seen and are in the practice of magic as able to provide benefits, certain powers, and special knowledge. Additionally, it was the standard Christian strategy to demonize all the gods, old gods of the nations as they were Christianized. So from within Christian myth, the demons can be seen as pro-human heroes, and all of the people's old divinities were demonized, leaving people feeling disenfranchised and oppressed. For all of these reasons, there grew up in the West an urge toward what we have called Satanism. As soon as Adonai is unmasked, a new understanding of his adversary is realized. A similar paradigm existed in the pre-Christian Greek mythology, where the chief god, Zeus, was the oppressor, and his opponent, the Titan Prometheus, a pro-human bringer of fire of consciousness. For those who are interested in this discussion, I recommend my book, Lords of the Left-Hand Path, Inner Traditions, edition 2012. In many ways, the practice of Satanism is a reversion to the old meaning of the daemon as a personal genius. Practices and beliefs which strengthen and develop this personal genius are good, but contrary to Orthodox Christian doctrine, hence to be condemned as pagan or diabolical by them and to be involved with the so-called left-hand path. Let us now pose the question, is the Mazdan way a left-hand path tradition? In order to answer this question, I will lay out the same definition I did in my book, Lords of the Left-Hand Path, originally written in 1993. Then we will examine this in terms of Zoroastrian revolution over 3,000 years ago. In that book, I noted two major criteria: self-deification and antinomianism. There are two major criteria for being considered a true practitioner of the left-hand path: deification of the self and antinomianism. The first of these is complex. The system of thought proposed by the magician or philosopher must be one that promotes individual self-deification, preferably based on the initiatorily magical scheme. This first criterion will be seen to have four distinct elements. 1. Self-deification, attainment of enlightened or awakened independently existing intellect and its relative immortality. 2. Individualism, the enlightened intellect is that of an individual, not a collective body. 3. Initiation, enlightenment and strength of essence necessary for the desired state of evolution of the self are attained by means of stages created by the will of the magician, not because he or she was divine to begin with. 4. Magic. Practitioners of the left-hand path see themselves as using their own wills and a rationally intuitive system or spiritual technology designed to cause the universe around them to conform to their self-willed patterns. The second criterion, antinomianism, states that the practitioners think of themselves as going against the grain of their culturally conditioned and conventional norms of good and evil. A true practitioner of the left-hand path will have the spiritual courage to identify himself with the cultural norms of evil. There will be an embracing of the symbols of conventional evil or impurity or irrationality or whatever quality the conventional culture fears and loathes. The Lord of the left-hand path will set himself apart from his fellow men, will actually or figuratively become an outsider in order to gain the kind of inner independence necessary for the other initiatory work present in the first criterion. The practice of this second criterion often manifests itself in antinomianisms, that is, the purposeful reversal of conventional normatives. When we look at the four major elements of the practice of the first criterion, we discover a mixed result. Self-deification is a process of self-realization and remembrance of one's divine origin and identity. The idea of individualism is highly emphasized in the Mazdan way. Each person possesses a unique Fravashi. The concept of initiation is strongly present, but it is almost a given that one is first initiated into the basic understanding. Then it will be up to the individual to attain the higher levels of being, Imagavan or Atravan. The stages are there, but the institution does not emphasize these. The states of being either are or are not present for all to see and recognize. The regards the practice of magic in this process. It is, of course, present because the very art and practice of Muslim worship is the spiritual technology of the Magavan or magician. Finally, as regards idea of antinomianism, the time of antinomianism is somewhat past for the Mazdan. In ancient times, it was strong. What members of the Mazmaga were struggling against the unphilosophical and crude worship of the Devas by the established authorities, the degree to which one lives in a culture or society which honors and upholds negative paragons and paragons of virtue is the degree to which one can practice antinomianism. If you work in an industry devoted to deception, you might want to rebel. If you exist in a society filled with ignorance and cruelty, you might want to rebel. But there is no need to revolt against the established order just for the sake of rebelling. Antinomianism is a reaction to injustice in the established order. Your conscience must be your guide. So in the answer to the question concerning the left-hand path, nature of the Muslim way, in some ways the Muslim way defines the left-hand path in the realization of divinity of the individual with the promise of a return to an ever young enjoyments of the flesh through the progressive application of technology and the Magavan, but perhaps because of its deep roots, its age-old mythology and theology, which the god of the system is seen both as an established deity and which is entirely deserving of our worship and honor, and rebellion is never against the wise Lord, but rather only against the societal effects of the enemies of the wise Lord, and the question of antinomianism is ameliorated. In the final analysis, the whole question of angels and demons or the right-hand path or left-hand path are extremely secondary. The Mazdan way is that which it always has been, as defined in its own terms, not in terms of other things. Such discussions as we have had here are only useful to those who are trying to understand the Mazdan way from an outside perspective, which is often the perspective one has to take in preparation for entering into the way directly. There are many doorways in the hall, all open to the truth. At this point, I wish to stress the critical reader that I am not engaging in tortured argument to reverse the prevailing and established truth. Rather, I am attempting to restore logic and reason to a myth that has already undergone more than its share of such twisting and distortion. God is wise, kind, and good, not vengeful, angry, and jealous. God wants man to be wise, strong, and good, and eventually to take his place in the circle of divinity. God joyfully gives man the tools he needs to complete the struggle and the work. Christian myth denies all of this because it has been twisted and distorted by the interference of the Davic forces of greed and lust for power and control. From the foregoing depiction, we can clearly see how, as seen from the standard Western perspective, the system of Zarathustra could be seen as the structural equivalent of what is called the West a left-hand path system. It was Zarathustra himself who rebelled against the prevailing norms of his society, creating new gods, abstract philosophical concepts, and overthrowing the old gods. He created a system of reevaluating of all values under the guidance of his good mind, conscience, and rational thought. In the process of doing this is what he taught that each individual was unique spiritual creation for Vashi, which was spiritual immortality from the beginning and which was destined for immortality in the flesh, but that in order to gain this final body, the individual would have to undergo a process of self-development defined by the struggle of truth versus the lie. The technology used to effect this struggle is the Magian art, magic, and or the living of an enlightened and ethical life. In the end, as in the beginning, the individual will return to its immortal and perfected form.